This is final exam review number 2. The bell's going to ring in 40 minutes, and I have like 36 questions to do. So I am going to have to go pretty fast. I might even have to record it in 2 different sessions, but I want to at least get started, okay? So it's going to have to be pretty fast. You might have to like pause it or rewind it or whatever, okay? Okay, so question number 1. The thing that I really need you to know about question 1 is that these matrices are being multiplied together. This is not Cramer's rule. This is not where you do the cross multiply thing. The reason is because we have these notches right here which tells you it's a matrix. So we're multiplying a 2 by 2 matrix by a 2 by 2 matrix. Those match, so it will work, and my answer is a 2 by 2. Okay, so we're going to take this row right here, and we're going to take this column right here, and the pink one right here that's on the right is going to drop down. So you go 1 times -1 is a -1, 1 times -1 is a -1, a -1 and a -1 is a -2. Now I'm going to do pink to green. Okay, this one drops down and goes to this -1. So 1 times -1 is a -1, 1 times -1 is a -1, a -1 and a -1 is a -2. Now I'm going to go purple to yellow, and this 1 right here drops down. So 1 times -1 is a -1, 1 times -1 is a -1, -1 and -1 is a -2. Purple to green, the one on the right drops down. 1 times -1 is a -1, 1 times -1 is a -1, -1 and -1 is a -2. Okay, so that's your answer. Question number 2. If you have an absolute value, the first step is to get it along, which it is. And this one's pretty easy because you have an equal sign. So remember, what could I put in this absolute value symbol to make it true? Well, it could be a 3 or a -3. Absolute value of 3 is a 3, absolute value of -3 is a 3. So then I know x plus 1 must be 3, or x plus 1 must be -3. So my solutions are x equals 2 when you pull that over, comma, pull that guy over, -4. You can totally check it, just plug those back in. Question number 3. She has $3,000 to invest in a bank that offers 5% interest. When will she have $4,000 if it's compounded monthly? So guys, when you do these money problems, my advice is to write the formula down first, okay? So the question is, when will the new amount be 4,000? So it's going to be 4,000 equals 3,000, 1 plus 0.05. It's compounded monthly, so n is a 12, raised to the 12 times t. Now, I know that I'm going to have to convert this because my t is stuck in the exponent, but I'm not ready yet. First, I need to get rid of the 3,000. I'm also going to put 1 plus 0.05 divided by 12 in my calculator. It does not give me a nice number. So I'm just going to leave it as this bad, expression right there, and I can just deal with it. And then 4 divided by 3 is also going to be messy because it's not a nice decimal. So I'm just going to leave it as 4/3. Now I'm going to convert it, and it's going to be log base 1 plus 0.05 divided by 12 of 4/3 is equal to 12t. And then to solve for t, I'm just going to divide. So putting in this in the calculator maybe it's just a little tricky. So I'll go log 4 divided by 3, close it, divided by log 1 plus 0.05 divided by 12, close it, hit enter. Then I'm going to go divided by 12, hit enter. They want it to the nearest tenth, and my answer is 5.8 years. Totally checkable. Hit store, enter. Put it into the left-hand side, the right-hand side over here, and I better get 4,000, okay? So please remember to check all these things. Okay, question 4, write this in exponential form. So you take the 3, raise it to the other side, which is a 5, is equal to x. Okay, question 5. So they give you this expression at the end, and they want you to evaluate it. So I want you to remember that when you do this, the first step is to fully expand and then substitute those values in. Okay, so when I expand this, it's log base a of x to the second. The z is on the bottom, so it's a negative. Log base a of z to the third. The y is on the bottom, so it's also a negative. And that's log base a of the square root of y, which is the same thing as y to the 1/2. Now that is not fully expanded, so don't substitute in yet. We've got to bring those exponents down. So it's 2 log base a of x minus 3 log base a of z minus 1/2 log base a of y. Now I can substitute. So log base a of x is a 3, so that's 2 times 3. Log base a of z is a 1 right there. Minus 1/2 log base a of y is a 4. Then I'm going to grab my calculator and go 2 parentheses 3, close it, minus 3 parentheses 1, close it, minus 1 divided by 2 parentheses 4, close it, hit enter, and my answer is 1. Okay? Question number 6. Find the domain. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is factor it. So the bottom goes to x and x, 2 goes to 2 and 1, signs are the same, they're both negative. Okay, so guys, on question 6, you just have to remember where domain comes from, and that is from the bottom. So x cannot be equal to 1, nor can x be a positive 2, and that's fine. They didn't tell me how to write it, so that's totally fine. Okay, question 7, find the x-intercepts. You need to know that if you don't write it as an ordered pair, you're not going to get credit. To find the x-intercept, you let y be 0, which is the same as letting the top be a 0. So if I set x minus 4 equal to 0, I get a 4, 0. Question 8, find the y-intercepts. The way you do that is let x be a 0. You guys, if you look at the original problem prior to factoring, letting x be a 0 is so easy because look what happens. This guy will go away, this guy will go away, and that will go away. They'll all become zeros. So you have a negative 4 over a positive 2, which is a negative 2. Okay? All right, question number 9. They're asking you more things about those rational functions, but they've changed equations, okay? So here's your equation, and there's nothing to factor. So question 9, find the vertical asymptote. You need to remember that comes from the bottom, and it's x equals negative 1, okay? Question 10, non-vertical asymptote. It could be horizontal. If you do biggest over biggest, the top exponent is bigger than the bottom, which means the horizontal asymptote is none, and you actually have an oblique or a slant. So the x plus 1 goes on the outside. On the inside, you have an x to the second. Now, this is critical. On the outside, you have a biggest exponent is a 1, and you have a constant. On the inside, biggest exponent is a 2. You have to have a 1, and you have to have a constant. What do I multiply by x to get x to the second? That's an x. Distribute x to the second plus x. Change my signs. Those cancel. I get a negative x. Bring down the 0. What do I multiply by x to get negative x? That's a negative 1. Distribute. That's a negative x minus 1. Change my signs. That's my remainder. I throw it out, and it's y equals x minus 1. If you don't have the y equals, my guess is you will probably not get any points. Okay? Okay, question number 11. This is easy. It's just setting this up. So they just want the augmented matrix. So x, y, z coefficients, and then a 9. There is no x. Y is 1. Z is 1. That's a 0. X is 1. There is no y. Z is 3. And the constant's a 2. That's your answer. Okay. Number 12. This is part of binomial theorem. So remember the formula is take the top number 10 factorial divided by the bottom number, which is 7 factorial, multiplied by 10 minus 7, which is 3 factorial. Okay. You can evaluate it there using the factorial button or write it down. I'm just going to do PRB. So go 10 PRB, right, enter, 7, enter, and I know that that's 120, and I'm done. If you do get this on your final, please make sure that you write that down, okay? Okay, question number 13. You have this f of x, and you have the inverse, and they want the range of the original. Well, the domain of the inverse is the range of the original. So the domain over here, 2 minus x cannot be 0. Pull your x over, 2 cannot be x. So in other words, x can't be 2. Well, if x can't be 2 here, then y can't be 2 here. There's my answer. Okay? Question 14. You've got this function f. I'm going to find the inverse. F to the negative 1 or f to the negative 1 of x, same thing. So the inverse is switching these around. Okay, now you don't have to write this down when you do it. I'm just trying to explain to you. So there's your inverse, and they're saying, what is f inverse of 2? Well, now that's an x value of the inverse. So when x is 2, what's y? Negative 1. Okay, number 15. Find the inverse. So you have x equals y to the third. Switch your x's and y's. Y equals x to the third. Oh, pardon me. I did switch them. Original is y equals x to the third. Switched is that. Okay, let me start all over because that was not clear. The original problem is y equals x to the third. To find an inverse, switch the x's and y's. Then you have to solve for y. So to solve for y, I would cube root both sides, and I would get y equals, there is no plus or minus because it's an odd root, and it's a cube root of x. Now, they're very picky about you writing it as y. It's not y, it's the inverse. So f inverse of x is equal to the cube root of x. That is option C, but the cube root of x is also the same as x to the 1/3, which is also option B. Look at the other two, they are not the same. So the answers are B and C. Question number 16, find f of g of 1. So the first thing you have to do is find g of 1. So go to an x value of 1, go down to what the g of x value is, and that's a 0. Then you find f of 0. So put your finger on x equals 0, go down to f of x, you get a negative 1, and that's your final answer. Okay? Number 17, what is the correct first step? You guys remember if you have 2 logs and a number that's not a 0, then you condense and convert. Okay? So those are subtracted. So when I condense those, they're going to be divided. The negative, which is the x, goes on the bottom. So look at the options. That is option A. Option B, they subtracted them. That's false. They are not both correct. None is correct is wrong because A worked out, so it's A. Okay. Question 18, maximum number of turning points. This is very simple. So all you do is look at that biggest exponent, which is a 6, subtract 1, your answer is 5. Okay, just memorize that. Question 19. You guys, the key to getting number 19 correct is remembering what a sub n minus 1 means. If you don't remember what that means, you're not going to get it right. It means the previous term. Okay, so the first term is 2. The second term, follow that formula, it's 1 minus the previous term, which is a 2, that gives you negative 1. A sub 3 is what they're looking for, so use the formula, 1 minus the previous term is a negative 1, minus a negative 1 is a plus 1, you get a 2, and that's your answer. Okay. Number 20, consider this equation, what is the correct first step? Okay, so if you look at this, you guys, I know I'm going to have to convert because my variable is stuck in the exponent, but I can't convert right now because the 30 is there. So I have to get rid of the 30. So I have e to the 5x is equal to 40 over 30. So look at the options, okay? It is not question 10, option A, pardon me. Look at B, it is option B because 40 over 30 reduces to 4/3. So that would be option B. Look at C, they took the ln of both sides. That is not correct. and all are correct, none are correct, it's B. Okay? Okay, here is 21. Letitia wants to triple her investments of P dollars invested at a bank, which offers 7% interest compounded continuously. Set up an equation. So guys, the first thing I always do is write down my formula. Okay, she wants to triple it. So, you know, I don't know for sure how they set this up. They probably put P dollars, and then if you start with P dollars and you triple it, that would be 3P dollars. And this is E to the rate, which is 0.07 times T, okay? So the P is a little strange, I know. We usually put in 100 and make it 300, but since they told us P, yeah, that's what they did, then that's what you do, okay? So that was 21. Here's number 22. The form of the partial fraction decomposition. Okay, so let me look at the answer on this. Okay, so the bad news is on the quiz 4, I worded it wrong, as well as on the Bell quizzes. So that's the bad news. I had you do the full partial fraction decomposition, and the wording that I said was the form. So the awesome thing is if it says the form of the partial fraction decomposition, all they want you to do is to just set it up. Okay, so let me double check so I do this right. Yeah, so when you split this, you're just going to do the right hand side of the problem. It's really super simple. See how the x is squared? So you have to have a 1, and then you have to 2, and then you have to have the x plus 2. Now, the only time you ever do like an ax plus b is if you have something squared, added or subtracted to something, like maybe a 2, that won't factor. Well, none of those are squared, added, or subtracted to something. So I'm not going to have that scenario. So this is an A, this is a B, and that's a C, and that's your answer. Okay? Okay, question 23. 23 is not my favorite. Basically, they've taken this matrix A, they have done some kind of a formula to it, and they've changed row 3. So you have to figure out what they've done. Okay, so look, row 1 doesn't change, row 2 doesn't change, and they're changing row 3. So whatever I choose to do becomes my new row 3. They want to get this as 0. Well, I could go -2 times row 1 plus row 3 gives me my new row 3. Let's see if that works. So that would be -2, -4, -6, -8. Put row 3 underneath it, and I get 0, -2, -5, -9. Well, look what they have. They have 0, -2. So I got it my first try. This third number is the x, which is here, so I know that x equals -5. This guy right here is my y. That's my last number, and that's a -9. Okay, 24. The remainder of long division. Okay, so x minus 2 into 3x to the second minus x plus 5. What do I multiply by x to get 3x a second? That's 3x. Distribute 3x a second minus 6x. Change my signs. Those cancel. I get a 5x. Bring down the 5. What do I multiply by x to get 5x? That's a 5. Distribute. I get 5x minus 10. Change my signs. That gives me a 15. They could ask you many questions. Their question is, what is the remainder? The answer is 15, not 15 over x minus 2. They could also ask you, what is the quotient? The quotient is the top without the remainder. That's the 3x plus 5. They could also ask you, what is the result? What is the answer? Something like that. If they ask you that, then it's 3x plus 5 plus 15 over x minus 2. Okay, yes, that's what they asked you, but be prepared for all of those. Okay, question number 25. Okay, so you have this, and they want to know the correct first step. Okay, well, this is a critical numbers type 2, and critical numbers type 2, step 1 is to set it equal to 0. So it's x minus 1 over x plus 2, subtract 2, is greater than or equal to 0. So look at the options, and that is option B. Okay. The other one, they cross multiplied, which you cannot do, and that's it. Okay. Here's question number 26. Okay, so they give you a rational function. They tell you the critical numbers. What is the solution? Okay, I really want you to graph this thing. So you're going to come out here to -5. Next is a 1, and then you have a 3. Now, the 1 is a restriction, so open circle here, closed here, closed here. When I factor the top, I don't get any exponents of 2. So what I'm saying is the top factor is 2x and x, and 5 and 3, and plus and minus. The bottom's x minus 1. All these exponents are 1. That tells me the signs are going to alternate. Okay, so I'm going to test a -6. So make sure you know how to put this in. So I'm going to go -6, store, enter. And I'm actually going to put it into the original. So I'm going to go parenthesis, membar, enter, x squared, plus 2, membar, enter, minus 15, close it, divided by parenthesis, membar, enter, minus 1, close it, enter, and I get a negative. So I know this is negative, positive, negative, positive. You must highlight the regions which are less than 0. So that would be my negatives. And my answer in interval form is -infinity to -5 with a bracket, union 1 to 3 with a bracket, and that's my answer. Okay, number 27. What is the correct first step? Remember, when you have an absolute value, step 1 is always to get it alone. So you just go absolute value of x plus 1 is less than 7. Look at the options. It's option A. Okay, 28. A ball is thrown upward. It models this formula. After how many seconds will it reach a maximum? T stands for time in seconds, and your h of t, which is your y, stands for the height. So they want to know how many seconds, which is the x coordinate of the vertex. So it's super simple. Negative b over 2 times a. b is 30, so it's -30 over 2 times -16. I know that a negative over a negative is a positive, so I can forget that. And now I'm just going to go 30 divided by 32 gives me 0.9375, and that would be seconds. Okay, and that is actually an exact answer. You know, you might want to write it as 30 over 32, which is 15 over 16, and that is exactly the same thing. Okay, question 29. Graph this. Okay, so this is the vertical asymptote, horizontal asymptote business. So the things you need to know, and you have to have these memorized, are x-intercept, y-intercept, vertical asymptote, non-vertical asymptote, and does it cross. To find an x-intercept, you let y be 0, which is the same as letting the top be a 0. Set the top equal to 0, you get a 0, 0. It's even, so it bounces. Okay. If 0, 0 is an x-intercept, then it's also a y-intercept. You need to remember vertical asymptotes come from the bottom. Set the bottom equal to 0, you get x equals -2, and it's odd. The non-vertical asymptote could be horizontal. If you go biggest over biggest, the top is bigger than the bottom, which means it is not horizontal. It's going to be oblique or slant. So you go x plus 2 into x to the second. We've already done this once. That x squared has got to have a 0x and a 0 that goes with it, or you'll miss it. What do I multiply by x to get x to the second? That's an x. Distribute, I get x to the second plus 2x. Change my signs. -2x, bring down the 0. What do I multiply by x to get -2x? That's -2. Distribute, -2x minus 4. Change your signs. I get a 4. Throw out the remainder. It's y equals x minus 2. Does it cross a non-vertical asymptote? Take the right side of the non-vertical, set it equal to the right-hand side of the original or reduced equation. Cross multiply, and you get x to the second minus 4 equals x to the second. This one comes over and knocks that out. -4 is not equal to 0, so a no, it does not cross. Okay. If it says yes, it does cross, then when you graph it, you have to show very clearly on your graph that it hits at that point, okay? So you have a vertical asymptote at x equals -2. I'm going to dash that in, and it's odd. I have a non-vertical asymptote at y equals x minus 2. You guys, it's not going to cross that. So if you want to, you can draw that line a solid line, because then I know I never cross either of those dashed lines, okay? The only other thing that I know is that it hits 0, 0, and it bounces when it hits it, okay? You guys, if you look at the left-hand side, there's no way your graph is going to be up high, because I've got to end at that asymptote, and that would make me have to hit the x-axis. So there's no way it's up high. It's got to be down low, okay? So it's going to be like this. Come down low, swing up, hit it. Please don't do funny things like this. Do not swing away, okay? It does not go away from the asymptote. People also do stuff like this. They just like go parallel to it, okay? Don't do that. So you just have to get closer and closer and closer, like this, okay? This asymptote is odd. This is down, so this is going to be up. It's going to hit it. It's going to bounce. Where do I go? I go to that asymptote, okay? Okay, that was 29. Here's number 30. Okay, assume the following is arithmetic, okay? Find the sum. So you have 4 plus 7 plus 10 plus 13 plus blah, blah, blah plus 310. Okay, so right here, n is 1, n is 2, n is 3, n is 4. I have no idea what n is. You cannot write those out, get to 310, and count them up. That is not an option, okay? It's arithmetic. My difference is a 3. I'm adding 3 every single time. The formula for the sum of arithmetic is S sub n is n divided by 2, a plus a sub n. So in order to find this, I need to know a, and n, a, and a sub n. A is the first term, that's a 4. A sub n is the last term, that's 310. The problem is I don't know what term number that is, but I can find it because this is just a number. So to find it, I have to go to the other formula. A sub n equals a plus d times n minus 1. So a sub n is 310, is the first term, which is a 4, plus the common difference, we're adding 3, times n minus 1. Now I just solve for n. So I have 4 plus 3n minus 3 equals 310. I get 3n plus 1 equals 310. 3n equals 309. When you pull that over, divide, and you get n equals 103. Now I pull that over here, and now I can find this. So the sum of the first 103 terms is 103 divided by 2. First term is a 4. A sub n is 310. That's the last one, term. So if you go 103 divided by 2, parenthesis, 4 plus 310, close it off, hit enter, your answer is 16,171. Okay, question 31. Okay, so solve this using matrices and row operations, and that's the method that you must use. Okay, so we're going to do our augmented matrix, 1, 1, 1, solid line 3. Underneath, x is -1, there is no y, z is 1, a -3 on the right, 2, 3, -1, and 1. So guys, all I'm going to do is just get zeros here, 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 and here. I noticed that I have a 0 in the center in row 2. Well, I don't need a 0 in the center there, but I do need it right there. So I'm going to switch row 2 and row 3, because then that'll give me one of my numbers, and switching rows is easy. So row 1 doesn't change. Switch row 2 and row 3. Okay, and it looks like that. Now I'm going to get a 0 here. So I'm going to use that 1. So I'm going to go -2 times row 1 plus row 2 becomes my new row 2. So row 1 doesn't change. Row 3 doesn't change. -2 times row 1 is -2, -2, -2, -6. Write row 2 underneath it. Add those together and you get 0, 1, negative 3, negative 5. Now I need to get a 0, sorry, I need to get a 0 here, and that was a negative 1. So all I'm going to do is go row 1 plus row 3 becomes my new row 3. So row 1 doesn't change, row 2 doesn't change, add row 1 and row 3, 0, 1, 2, and 0. Okay, now I just want to check something very quickly. If you look at 31, okay, anyway, okay, so, oh, that's funny. I switched to get the 0 and I just messed up my 0. So I'm not done. I got to get a 0 right here. So I'm going to go row 2 minus row 3 or row 3 minus row 2. It doesn't matter. So row 2 minus row 3 becomes my new row 3. So row 1 doesn't change. Row 2 doesn't change. Add row 2 and row 3 and you get, or subtract them, sorry. 0 minus 0, 0. 1 minus 1, 0. Negative 3 minus 2, negative 5. Negative 5 minus 0, negative 5. Now I just start from the bottom. So I go here and I get negative 5z equals negative 5. Divide and that gives me z equals 1. Next row is y minus 3z equals negative 5. Z is a 1. So that's y minus 3 equals negative 5. Pull it over, y equals negative 2. Top row is x plus y plus z equals 3. That's x minus 2 plus 1 equals 3. That's x minus 1 equals 3. That gives me x equals 4. So my answer is 4, negative 2, 1, and I'm done. Okay, that was 31. Here's 32. Solve this log equation. Okay, so remember, if you have two logs and a number that's not a 0, condense and convert. Okay, those are added. So when I squish them, they're going to be multiplied. So it looks like that. Now I convert it. So it's 4 to the first is x times x plus 3. Distribute the x. X to the second plus 3x equals 4. Pull your 4 over. X to the second plus 3x minus 4 equals 0. Factor x and x. 4 and 1. Signs are different because it's the positive. I get x equals 1 and negative 4. It was given in log, so I must check, and I must check from the original. So I'm going to check x equals 1. So that's log base 4 of 1 plus 3 plus log base 4 of 1 equals 1. Grab your calculator. Here's how you put it in your calculator. You go log 3 plus 1 is 4. Close it off. Divided by log 4. Close it off. Plus log 1. Close it off. Divided by log 4. Close it off. Hit enter. 1 equals 1. You've got an answer. Let's do x equals negative 4. So go log base 4 of negative 4 plus 3 plus log base 4 of negative 4 is equal to 1. I know that's an invalid solution because x cannot be, it can't take the log of a negative. You guys be very careful that the only thing you box or highlight is x equals 1, not the invalid. Okay, question number 33. So they give you this terrible looking formula. That's just a equals ce to the kt, and that's what I would use. Remember on the steps on this, find your k, find your model, answer the question. Okay, there are 150 bacteria to start with. Okay, and it says it doubles every 5 hours. So that's what I'm going to use to find my k. So c is what I start with. Double it, so it's 300. How much time passed? 5. So I put in values for A and C and T, and now I'm going to find my K. So I divide e to the 5k, 300 divided by 150 is a 2. Convert it, log base e of 2 is equal to 5k. Divide, you get ln 2 divided by 5. Grab your calculator and go ln 2, close it off, divided by 5, enter, and I get k is approximately 0.1386. Everybody hit store, enter, okay? And then they want to know how much they'll be in 48 hours. Well, we've got to do our model. So the model is A equals 150 e to the 0.1386 times t, and they want to know 48 hours. So the new amount is 150 e to the 0.1386 times 48. So I'm going to go 150 second ln 48 membar, enter, close it, enter, and I get, it doesn't tell you where to round, I'm going to go to the nearest whole, so it is 116,407 bacteria. Okay, part B is a little strange, I think. You guys, I need you to remember that an exponential graph grows like this, or it looks like that, pardon me, and the y goes up and up and up forever without any limit. On question B, they're trying to give you a limit of 100 million bacteria, but it's not possible to have a limit because this keeps going up and up and up. Okay, so is it appropriate? No. My response would be an exponential model or an exponential graph or equation has no limits as to how large it can get. Okay, question number 34. Okay, they give you the equations. They want you to estimate. So if you look at the graph, the first place they hit is in the quadrant 2. Okay, so upper left area. Looks like you went about maybe to the left like 0.8 and then up maybe like 1.8. So I'm just guessing. The other point is in quadrant 4, so the bottom right. Looks like you went to the right, maybe 1.6, and then when you went down, maybe like 0.8. Anywhere around there's fine. Okay, question 34B wants you to actually solve it. So I cannot use elimination. I'm going to solve equation number 2 for x, so I get 1 minus y, and then I'm going to put it here. So I have x times y, which is 1 minus y, is negative 10 ninths. I'm going to, oh sorry, I did that wrong. So x is 1 minus y. So that's 1 minus y times y. Distribute, and I get y minus y squared equals negative 10 ninths. Cross multiply, 9y minus 9y squared equals negative 10. I know I'm going to have to factor. I don't want a negative 9y squared, so I'm going to pull that over. So I have 9y squared minus 9y minus 10 equals 0. So I'm thinking it might be like 3 and 3 and 5 and 2. That gives you 15 and 6, and that does give you a 9. The biggest is the negative, looks like that. So that gives you y equals a negative 2/3 and y equals 5/3. So I'm going to come over here, negative 2/3. Come over here, positive 5/3. Plug it right here. X equals 1 minus a negative 2/3. You could literally put it in your calculator like that. It's going to give you a fraction or an ugly decimal. Let me just show you how to do it. So if you go 1 plus 2 divided by 3, it gives you a bad decimal. But if you go second PRB, it's 1 2/3. Or you could just look at it and figure that out. Let's do the next one. X equals 1 minus 5/3. Let's just practice that PRB. 1 minus 5 divided by 3, enter, ugly decimal. Second PRB, enter. That gives you a negative 2/3. Totally checkable. Store them and plug them back in. Okay, here's question number 35. Okay, find the inverse. So switch your x's and y's. So it's going to look like that. Solving for y, move your 1 over. So that's x minus 1. Cross multiply, but I'm not going to distribute. So it's y times x minus 1 equals 3. The x minus 1 is multiplied by the y. So to get rid of it, I divide. And my inverse is 3 over x minus 1. I know that was fast. I'm sorry. I have like 2 minutes until the bell rings. Number 36, and this is the last one. This is a critical numbers type 2 problem. You need to memorize the steps. Step 1, set it equal to 0. So I'm going to bring that 1 over and it becomes a negative. Step 2, common denominator is going to be x plus 1. This guy already had the x plus 1, so I write it down. This guy's missing the x plus 1. You guys are really messing up, some of you, with distributing that. That is so easy, so be careful. A negative 1 times x is a negative x. A -1 times a +1 is a -1, is greater than or equal to 0. 3x minus 1x is x, minus 2 over x plus 1 is greater than or equal to 0. Next step, critical numbers. From the top, you get a 2 and a -1. You also have a restriction, x cannot be a -1. Number line, -1, open, +2, closed. I'm gonna, my signs will alternate nicely. I can see that if I put in a 0, I'll have a -2 over +1, which gives me a negative. I know those are going to be positive. I want greater than 0, which is positive, here and here. In interval form, my answer is -infinity to -1 with a parenthesis, union 2 to infinity. There's my answer.